when the son of the world's most famous drug lord commissioned a custom pistol. Not gold-plated, not diamond-encrusted in the usual narco style, but engraved with Adolf Hitler's face and a swastika rendered in precious gemstones. And then put it in a music video for millions of people to see. Law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border took notice. The DEA, the U.S. Treasury, and Mexican federal investigators all have files on Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar. He carries a $10 million bounty on his head. He is currently one of the most wanted men on earth, and he chose, out of every possible symbol of power available to the heir of a billion-dollar cartel empire, to put Hitler's face on his gun. But I assure you the real story lies in the hidden psychology behind that choice, the classified profile that government investigators compiled on him, the specific context of the culture he grew up in, and the trail of violence that surrounds that gun. Those are the details the media conveniently avoids talking about. Because if you understand why Iván Archivaldo did this, you understand something about how one of the most dangerous men alive sees the world. And that is a far more disturbing story than just a narco with a controversial pistol. But amidst one of the most violent criminal careers in the history of Mexican organized crime, Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar accomplished something that nobody else in cartel history had done quite so boldly. With just one gun, one custom weapon displayed in one music video, he told the entire narco world exactly who he believed himself to be. One image that defined his identity forever. And the identity he chose was Adolf Hitler's. But before we get into the Nazi obsession itself, I need you to first understand who Iván Archivaldo actually is. Not the version that gets 2 paragraphs in a drug war article, but the real portrait. Because this story only makes sense when you understand the world that built him. Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar was born to Maria Alejandrina Salazar Hernandez, El Chapo's first wife. His exact birth date is disputed. Some official documents say October 2nd, 1983. Even the year and the city vary by source. What is not disputed is where he grew up. Zapopan and Guadalajara, Jalisco. Not the mountains of rural Sinaloa, where his father was born dirt poor and picked marijuana at 15. Iván grew up in an urban environment, with money, with the protection of the most powerful cartel name in Mexico. He wore good clothes. He drove fast cars as a teenager. He grew up understanding that his last name was a weapon. Now, while all this was going on, while Iván was being raised in the relative urban comfort that El Chapo's empire afforded, his father was building something extraordinary. El Chapo had turned the Sinaloa cartel into the dominant criminal organization in the Western Hemisphere. He was running cocaine from Colombia, marijuana from Mexico, heroin from the mountains, and moving all of it through an elaborate network of tunnels, aircraft, submarines, and corruption that stretched across the entire U.S.-Mexico border. The money was incomprehensible, and El Chapo had sons who would inherit all of it. January 19th, 2001. El Chapo escapes from Puente Grande Federal Prison. He was supposed to be Mexico's most secure prisoner. Guards, officials, and judges had all been bought or pressured. When the doors opened and he walked out, he made a phone call to his eldest son, Cesar. Cesar didn't pick up. He called Iván. Iván picked up. And according to accounts compiled from sources within the cartel, Iván drove to his father, facilitated his escape, and was told to tell the family that everything would be fine, and they wouldn't hear from El Chapo for a while. Ivan was somewhere between 17 and 20 years old. That is the moment that defines him. Not a soldier, not a sicario, his father's most trusted contact when everything was on the line. December 2003. Iván is street racing his beige BMW M3 through the streets of Culiacán, Sinaloa, when he slams into the back of a pickup truck with a broken taillight. The passenger in his car is killed. Iván survives, but suffers injuries that reportedly give him a chronic medical condition, a slight limp that associates would later observe. He is already coordinating drug shipments at this point, moving cocaine to Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York, under the guidance of a Sinaloa figure known as La Puerca, or El Animal. April 2004. Here's where things get dark very quickly. A 20-year-old business student from Calgary, Canada, named Kristen Page Dayel, is on a student exchange program at a university in Guadalajara, fulfilling what friends described as her dream of studying abroad and absorbing another culture. On the night of April 9, she is at a nightclub called Bali Bar in Zapopan, Jalisco. Multiple sources and contemporary news reports allege that Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar was also at that club. Accounts allege he pursued Kristen Dale. She rejected his advances. Kristen Dale and her Mexican companion Cesar Augusto Pulido Mendoza left the club together. They were shot in the parking lot. Both died. Iván reportedly drove away in a red BMW. In the days and weeks that followed, El Chapo allegedly deployed the full corruption apparatus of the Sinaloa cartel to protect his son, paying doctors, nurses, and other witnesses to provide false testimony, placing Iván in a wheelchair, unable to walk. In a completely different part of the country at the time the murders occurred, the case was never resolved. Kristen Dale's murder is officially listed as unsolved to this day. Her family in Calgary never got justice. This is the man who would commission the Hitler pistol 9 years later. February 2005. Zapopan municipal police officers observe a man being thrown from a car and pursue the vehicle. They arrest Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar along with associates. In the hours before his arrest, 6 men had been executed in Guadalajara on his orders. Iván is charged with money laundering and organized crime offenses. He is sent to La Palma Federal Prison, one of Mexico's highest security facilities. Now listen closely, because what I'm going to say next brings everything together about who this man is psychologically. While Iván was in La Palma from 2005 to 2008, government investigators compiled a psychological profile on him. This profile was later leaked and published by Mexican journalist Humberto Paget in 2015, and the words in that document are some of the most revealing I have ever seen associated with a cartel figure. The profile describes Iván Archivaldo as, and I'm reading directly, anxious, suspicious, reserved, and evasive, with veiled hostility. It adds that he shows probable psychological violence toward persons that he does not consider on his socioeconomic level. He has, according to the psychologist, a poor ability to recall long-term memories accurately. And here is the line that matters most for everything we're going to discuss today. The psychologist noted that Iván interprets reality through the lens of archetypes. Archetypes. He doesn't see individuals, he sees categories. Symbols. The powerful and the weak, the superior and the inferior, the king and everyone else. A man who thinks in archetypes and reserves veiled hostility for those he does not consider his equal. That is the man who puts Hitler's face on his gun, not as an intellectual statement about World War II, as an archetype of absolute power, racial contempt, and the capacity for total destruction. According to accounts from those who monitored his time in prison, Iván used to cry himself to sleep every night out of fear of being murdered. He was psychologically tormented by CIEDO director José Luis Santiago Vasconcelos, who pushed him repeatedly to turn in his father. Iván refused. El Chapo, for his part, tried to smuggle Long Johns to his son during a cold winter in 2007. The bribe chain to get the clothes through the guards ended up costing $500,000. El Chapo paid it without hesitation. In November 2008, Santiago Vasconcelos died in what was described as an aviation accident. Multiple sources allege Iván arranged it as revenge for the years of psychological torment. April 2008, a judge, later suspended for suspicious rulings, overturns Iván's money laundering conviction. He is released from La Palma. He returns to Guadalajara, then Culiacán, and he comes back into a world that has just exploded. May 8, 2008. Just weeks after Iván's release from prison, his half-brother Edgar Guzmán López is ambushed and killed in the parking lot of a shopping center in the Tres Rios neighborhood of Culiacán. Edgar dies alongside 2 others. Police find more than 500 AK-47 shell casings at the scene, who had broken from Sinaloa and declared war on El Chapo. Iván, fresh out of 3 years in federal prison, walked directly into a cartel war that had just claimed his brother. Reports indicate the killing marked him deeply. This is the world, and this is the man that commissions the Hitler pistol 5 years later. Now, here's where it gets truly interesting. Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar is now one of the most powerful figures inside the Sinaloa cartel. His father, El Chapo, is still free, but increasingly hunted. Iván and his brother Alfredo are managing significant portions of the cartel's operations, coordinating drug shipments, managing distribution networks across the United States, directing sicarios, paying bribes, and maintaining the Sinaloa cartel's territorial dominance in an environment where the CJNG is rising and old alliances are fracturing. He is also, in 2013, a public figure in the narco world. He has social media accounts, he posts photos, luxury cars, private jets, weapons, women, the trappings of cartel royalty performed for an audience. Because in the narco world, the performance of power is itself a form of power. Fear doesn't just come from violence. It comes from the projection of an image so overwhelming that people don't even consider challenging it. And so in 2013, Iván commissions a narco corrido from a group called Código FN. The song is called Iván el Mayor. And when the music video is produced, Iván provides one of his personal weapons as a prop. We know. But this, nah. Now this was different in its deliberateness. This was not a gold pistol with his initials. This was not a jeweled revolver with a cartel logo. The weapon Iván displayed in the Iván el Mayor music video was a custom-made firearm with Adolf Hitler's image engraved on the grip in gemstones and precious metals, with similar Nazi insignia engraved along the barrel. He put it in a music video, publicly, on purpose, but here's the part that might actually interest you. Look at the lyrics of that song, alongside the gun. Iván el Mayor opens with lines establishing that he holds no formal military rank. I am not a soldier, much less a general, but immediately asserts that he has a higher rank than any of that, because the blood of Guzmán runs through his veins. The lyrics reference his white Lamborghini, private jets, diamonds embedded in his weapons, trained sicarios who will open fire the instant anyone shows disrespect. It is a song entirely about inherited dominance, absolute authority, and the capacity for lethal violence. And in the middle of all of that, the gun with Hitler on it. You see, this is not a coincidence of aesthetics. This is a deliberate identity statement, and understanding what that statement means requires understanding something about the specific culture Iván grew up in and performs for. Mexico has a deeply embedded system of colorism, a hierarchy of social value based on skin tone that dates to the Spanish colonial period. In northern Mexico, and particularly in Sinaloa's narco culture, lighter skin has historically carried higher status. The Guzmán family is relatively light-skinned by the standards of their community. In the narco world that Iván operates in, whiteness, or the performance of whiteness, is associated with power and superiority. This isn't an imported ideology. It is a local one that has existed for centuries. Why did Iván use Nazi imagery? Well, it all boils down to how power symbols work in that specific cultural context. The swastika, Hitler's image, the SS aesthetic, these function in Mexican narco culture not as a coherent ideological commitment to European fascism, but as internationally recognized symbols of absolute racial contempt, total control, and the capacity for unlimited destructive violence. For a man who, according to his own psychological profile, interprets reality through the lens of archetypes, these are the most powerful archetypes available. Hitler is not a historical figure to Iván Archivaldo. Hitler is a symbol of a man who decided he was superior to everyone else and acted accordingly without restraint. If you take the time and do your homework, you can find out that Iván is not the only cartel figure to make this connection. In 2025, social media accounts covering Mexican cartel activity documented another figure known as Zutano, displaying a custom pistol with Hitler's image and a swastika on the grip. Analysts covering the case explicitly noted that Zutano was not the first Mexican cartel figure to do this, and cited Iván Guzmán's Iván el Mayor music video as the original precedent. The practice exists in a broader context. Borderland beat correspondents and cartel analysts have documented the Chapitos faction more broadly, as using Nazi-adjacent imagery and, according to observers, regarding themselves as racially superior within the specific colorism framework of northern Mexican narco-culture. But ironically, the man who chose Hitler as his power symbol is a Mexican man. The man who uses swastikas to project dominance is the son of someone who grew up picking marijuana in rural Sinaloa. The ideology of racial supremacy that the Nazi symbol represents, in its original European context, would have categorized both El Chapo and Iván as racial inferiors. Iván Archivaldo is not adopting Nazi ideology. He is cannibalizing its visual power. He is taking the most recognizable symbol of absolute contempt for human life and racial hierarchy, and repurposing it as a performance of his own dominance within a culture that already has its own racial hierarchy built in. To put into context just how deliberately this identity was constructed, look at what surrounds the gun and Iván's public persona in the years around the Iván El Mayor video. He is posting on social media constantly. Luxury cars, including the white Lamborghini that appears in the music video, reportedly a gift from his Los Angeles drug distributor, Eddie Escobedo, alias El Mago. Private jets, mansions, elaborate parties, a pet lion and photographs. According to U.S. federal indictments and law enforcement statements, he and his brother Alfredo kept tigers on their ranches. The 2023 DOJ indictment against the Chapitos alleged they fed captured rivals, some dead, some alive, to tigers. The brothers denied it in a public letter, but the tigers themselves were confirmed by law enforcement. A cartel boss. Tiger Farms. Hitler's face on a pistol. This is not a man building a discrete criminal empire. This is a man performing an identity of complete, terrifying impunity. One DEA official from Chicago's Field Division publicly described the Chapitos as the goofy narco juniors who are on social media with the Ferraris and tigers. But that framing misses what is actually happening. Iván's social media performance is not goofy. It is calculated. The performance of absolute opulence combined with explicit violence iconography is designed to do one thing: make everyone watching understand that consequences do not apply to him. That is exactly what the Hitler pistol communicates. Not an ideology, an immunity from accountability. August 2016. Now here's where it gets complicated. Because just 3 years after the Iván El Mayor video and the Hitler pistol, the man who displays Nazi imagery as a power symbol is himself humiliated in one of the most shocking public events in Sinaloa cartel history. August 15, 2016. It is reportedly Iván's birthday celebration. He is at the exclusive restaurant La Leche in Puerto Vallarta. Upscale tourist area, beautiful location. Exactly the kind of place that narco-influencer Iván Archivaldo would choose for a birthday party. Around 1 a.m., 7 armed men affiliated with the CJNG and the Beltran Leyva organization walk into the restaurant. They take 6 men out at gunpoint in broad sight of other diners. Among them, Alfredo Guzman, Iván's brother. Sources differ on whether Iván was taken as well or narrowly escaped. Within weeks, both brothers are released. The cartel that shot down military helicopters, that turned a city block into a war zone to protect one of its own, negotiated its way out. But the humiliation of being kidnapped from a Puerto Vallarta restaurant stands. But did the humiliation stop him? Well, no. Instead, it only made the violence that came next more extreme. October 17, 2019. The Culiacanazo. Mexican military captures Iván's half-brother, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, in Culiacan. Hundreds of Chapitos gunmen mobilize across the city within hours. Armored vehicles, rocket launchers. The cartel takes control of a housing complex for military families, using soldiers' wives and children as leverage. Roadblocks are set on fire. At least 13 people die. The battle goes on for hours. And then Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, personally, publicly, orders Ovidio released. The Mexican government blinks. Ovidio walks free, The Chapitos just fought the Mexican military to a draw over the city of Culiacan, Sinaloa. The man who put Hitler on his gun just proved he could hold a city hostage. April 2023. The U.S. Department of Justice unseals sweeping indictments in New York and Illinois against all 4 Chapitos. The New York indictment describes the Sinaloa cartel's fentanyl operation as the largest, most violent, and most prolific fentanyl trafficking operation in the world. The DOJ alleges the Chapitos tortured captured rivals using techniques including stuffing chili peppers into wounds after ripping muscles from arms. The indictment alleges they kept tigers and fed victims to them. They are accused of experimenting with fentanyl on human beings, some of whom died. The U.S. government doubles Iván's bounty to $10 million. The Chapitos respond with a public letter to the media. In it, they deny the fentanyl charges, deny the tigers, deny the torture. They complain that others are profiting from the El Chapo brand, from clothing to narco corridos, without their permission. And they write, with what appears to be sincere bitterness, "We wanted to choose a distinct life, with good studies, which was denied to us." The man with the Hitler pistol, the man who, according to prosecutors, ordered the killings of rivals and the torture of enemies, claims he wanted to choose a different life. And maybe there is a sliver of truth in that, because according to everything compiled about his early life, Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar did not choose the cartel in the way that word implies choice. He was put into it as a teenager by his father and El Mayo. He was raised inside a system that had already decided who he was before he could decide for himself. But here's the disturbing detail. Whatever the origins of his life in the cartel, the Hitler pistol was a choice. The music video was a choice. The killings were choices. The psychological profile from 2005 says he interprets reality through archetypes and applies psychological violence to those he deems beneath him. That is not something that was forced on him by his father. That is who Iván Archivaldo is. August 29, 2024. Mexican military personnel reportedly capture Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar on the outskirts of Culiacan, Sinaloa. The specific circumstances and his current confirmed status remain disputed in public reporting as of the time this was researched. What is not disputed is that his brother Ovidio is in U.S. custody and has agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. His brother Joaquin is in U.S. custody, having been arrested alongside El Mayo in New Mexico in July 2024. His brother Alfredo remains at large. And Iván, whether captured or not, has left behind one of the most documented and deliberately constructed identities in the history of Mexican organized crime. The man who put Hitler on his gun built an empire on fentanyl that is now responsible for tens of thousands of American deaths every year. The DEA has stated publicly that the Sinaloa cartel, meaning the Chapitos operation, is largely responsible for the massive influx of fentanyl into the U.S. over the past several years. When an American dies of a fentanyl overdose, there is a non-zero statistical likelihood that the drug came through an operation managed in part by the man who displayed Adolf Hitler in a music video in 2013. According to multiple sources, DEA documents, Mexican federal records, court filings in 4 separate U.S. judicial districts, and investigative reporting by outlets including Vice, Inside Crime, and Borderland Beat, what Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar built is not just a criminal operation. It is a brand. A deliberately cultivated identity that uses luxury, spectacle, violence, and transgressive imagery to project an aura of total impunity. Few cartel bosses in modern history have been as publicly visible as Iván, while remaining physically free for as long as he did. Some observers note the contradiction, that serious narcos do not post on social media, do not put their pistols in music videos, do not live in ways that generate so many documented details for law enforcement. And that observation is correct. Iván Archivaldo is not a traditional narco in El Chapo's mold. El Chapo was careful, disciplined, ruthless in his secrecy. The psychological profile suggests Iván struggles with that kind of discipline. He is impulsive. He has low frustration tolerance. He interprets the world through archetypal symbols of power, rather than tactical calculation. But even if that impulsiveness ultimately contributed to his downfall through the reported August 2024 capture, it had immeasurable impact. The Chapitos transformed the Sinaloa cartel from a cocaine and heroin trafficking organization into the primary manufacturer and distributor of synthetic fentanyl into the United States. That transformation happened under Ivan's watch, and Iván used the identity performance, including the Nazi pistol, as part of the way that transformation was communicated to an internal audience. You do not recruit thousands of sicarios, manage distribution networks across 60 American cities, or maintain loyalty in an organization at war with itself and at war with the CJNG without projecting an image of absolute, terrifying authority. The Hitler gun is part of that projection. The only question left to answer right now is, can what Iván Archivaldo built survive him? Other cartel leaders and analysts are watching the Chapitos' internal civil war. The bloody conflict between the Chapitos faction and the Meiza faction loyal to El Mayo's son, and debating what the long-term structure of the Sinaloa cartel looks like, without both El Mayo and the elder Chapitos available to hold the organization together. The civil war that erupted in September 2024 has left, according to the Sinaloa State Prosecutor's Office, more than 5,000 people dead and disappeared across the state. That is not a minor power struggle. That is a structural collapse in slow motion. But even if the Chapitos faction, as Iván built it, were to fracture completely, they are not likely to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States. The conditions that enabled Iván's specific construction of the Chapitos fentanyl empire are not easily replicated, and that matters for what comes next. The Chapitos built their fentanyl operation on 4 very specific foundations. First, direct supply chain relationships with Chinese chemical companies providing precursor chemicals, which took years to establish. Second, a sophisticated laboratory network. The U.S. indictment references fentanyl labs in Culiacan producing product at industrial scale. Third, a distribution network built on El Chapo's existing infrastructure, the tunnels, the contacts, the corrupt port officials that took decades to construct. And fourth, the specific social dominance structure in Sinaloa that allows the Chapitos to recruit, retain loyalty, and manage territory through a combination of money and violence that no other cartel has been able to replicate at the same scale. If other factions try to copy what Iván built, they are more likely to replicate only the violence and not the organizational architecture, the supply chains, the lab networks, the international chemical relationships. Those take years and specific expertise to rebuild if they are disrupted. The violence is easy. The infrastructure is the hard part. And here's something no one actually talks about. While Iván Archivaldo's capture, if confirmed, was presented by Mexican and U.S. officials as a transformative moment in the war on fentanyl, the problem that he built is nowhere near finished. In fact, according to Insight Crimes tracking, the Chapitos' fentanyl ban, imposed internally in 2023 after Ovidio's arrest, with over 50 people killed for violating it, simply pushed fentanyl production to other municipalities and other states. The market Iván created does not disappear when Iván disappears. Demand in the United States is not reduced by a Mexican military operation in Culiacan. The supply chains reroute, the labs relocate, the product keeps moving. And the Hitler pistol, that specific documented artifact of one man's psychological framework made visible, is still out there on film. The Iván El Mayor music video is still watchable. The gun is still visible. The image of El Chapo's eldest son holding a weapon with Adolf Hitler's face rendered in gemstones on the grip. In a narco corrido that celebrates his inherited power and absolute authority, is still part of the documented record of what the Chapitos built and what they believed themselves to be. So what do we actually make of Iván Archivaldo's obsession with the Nazi? Here is the most honest assessment. It is not an ideology. It is a mirror, a man who was told from birth that his blood made him special. who grew up watching his father's name command terror, who emerged from 3 years in a federal prison traumatized and more dangerous, who lost his brother to a parking lot ambush and responded by escalating. That man found in Hitler's image the archetype that matched how he already saw himself. Not a German, not a fascist, but a being who considered himself categorically superior to the people around him, who was willing to use absolute violence to enforce that hierarchy, and who wanted the entire world to see it clearly. One custom pistol, one music video, and a window into the mind of one of the most dangerous men in the history of the drug war. Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar's current status remains contested, but we don't think his story is done being written, because the empire he built on that identity, the fentanyl, the labs, the corruption networks, the internal civil war, all of that is still unfolding right now. And the question of who inherits the Chapitos organization and what identity they choose to perform is one that law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border are still trying to answer.